Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a very interesting little art book. And I call it an art book because it's not a standard book. There's no stitching involved for the binding. I'm using an accordion fold, and I just use some poster board. You can use any type of large paper to get a long length of pages that you want. But I find poster board is easier to acquire, it's sturdy, and it comes in an assortment of colors. Now I also use a found object. Well, not exactly found. I didn't stumble upon it outside or anything. I purchased it at, I think it was Joann Fabrics. It's just a little Halloween decoration. But it's simple enough to make your own if you're not into the snakes like the one I made. And I'll show you that really quickly in the beginning of this video. I like to make a faux metal cover for this journal. And it's kind of interesting because with the Halloween theme, it's very appropriate. It looks like a dusty relic that you picked up and maybe has some magical powers. But that's my imagination running away with me. For this video though, we're just going to use paper, that found object, some paint and adhesive. So let's get started. So here's the book with a wooden cover that I purchased. And I painted it to make it look old and aged, and I'll show you that technique later in the video. And then I just have an accordion spine. Now I chose to use collage throughout the book, but whatever you choose for the pages is up to you. I'm going to show you the entire procedure. It's a really fun technique. For the backing, I just cut a piece of cardboard to fit, to be the same size as the front. And it's a great and easy technique to use to make a really interesting art book. You can even display it completely open. So let me show you what you need to get started. So here's my little wooden square. Got this at, I think, the Joann Fabrics store. They sell these at the holidays. This one has a snake, so obviously it's for Halloween. And then I cut out the backing just with some scrap cardboard that I had, an extra box. So I used the front as my template and cut it out. And so we'll be covering that to make the back piece, and I'll show you that very soon. Some people don't like snakes, they don't like the design that's on it, or you can't find it. But you can make an alternative version, and you can just modify it to fit your piece. This is just a wooden plank. I think I got this one in a package of 6 or so at the dollar store. But these are readily available at craft stores, even big stores. It's just a small little piece of birchwood here. This makes a great cover. Remember, we're going to cover it, so we're going to make it sturdier. We just need it to be slightly thick. And then you could just take a shape that you like and glue it on. So you could have a pumpkin for a fall theme one. And it doesn't have the exact same details as the snake, but these cutouts come in all different varieties, so you can find a different cutout that you like. Here I have a larger one, an angel, and by adhering it down, I'll get that little texture and relief, and it's the same technique. And here are just some holly leaves, so you can kind of play around with what you want for your design. So that's one option if you can't find that little snake wooden cover that I used in the video. You can just kind of make your own and come up with a version that you like. I have some gold metallic paint that I like to use on the front of the piece. And I have some black chalk paint. You don't need to use chalk paint, but I cover the entire cover with that, front and back. And I'll show you that technique. I have scissors and a ruler and a pencil. And then I also have some paper. Now, and because this is an accordion book and it folds out, I needed to find paper long enough. You could find paper in the art supply section of stores like Hobby Lobby and Michael's and Joann Fabrics. I use poster board. I just think it's a good, sturdy material. It's very inexpensive. It comes in different colors, and I can fold it the way I want. So I just cut a strip to be the height for the pages that I wanted, which happens to be 8 centimeters for this particular block. And you can see there's a little bit left of room for top and bottom here. So I just have a strip the length of that poster board. I also cut an extra strip to use for backings. So I'm going to cut this down later in the video. And because this paper is too stiff to make a lot of folds It's perfect for folding for the pages, but it's too stiff for folding around the cardboard to get a nice result. I just have some black paper here that I'm going to fold over, and I'll show you that as well. So for that, I'll need some adhesive. You can use matte medium, you can use white school glue or Mod Podge, and I'm going to use Mod Podge. So let's start by backing this cardboard piece and then working on painting the cover. So to back the cardboard piece, and you can back either side, what I'm going to do is just cut around my square here. And I like to leave a generous amount. So I'll just cut the paper down, just like that. Now you can also paint around it, and any areas that are exposed, I will paint around it. But I like to just train the paper, just fold it over the edge here, and I'll do that around all four sides before I add any adhesive. And then these four corners here that are kind of squares, I just cut them diagonally, and I can cut them further, but this is a good starting point. So now from here, I can put my piece down and start to really fold it into place. If my paper is very thin, this is a great way to go. If it's too thick, I'll trim it down further. But for right now, that works out well. I'm going to take my glue here, my Mod Podge, and I'm just going to spread it around the back of this piece fairly thinly. This will just grip it and hold it in place. Then I just set it down. And then I just choose two sides. And again, I just want to make sure it fits nicely. So I burnish it, and I'll flip it over. Just burnish it one time, all the way across where I already put the glue. And so now I'll start adding the glue to that piece. Again, using that foam brush, I like to put the glue right on the cardboard. Put a little bit on the paper as well, and on the edge. So now I'll take that side and press it over, burnish it really well, and then when it comes to the edge where there's that little lip, I want to really press down there. Use my fingernail. You can use your ruler, a bone folder, anything, just to get that nice edge. And I'll do the same thing on this side. I like to press all that paper, all that extra paper that's folded over, press it down nicely as well. And I'll repeat this process on this side. Again, I'll speed it along so you can see the process, but we don't have to spend a lot of time on that. I'm adding my glue all around here just to get a really nice hold. And again, I press it down and burnish it. So now I'm ready to work on the sides. If it bellowed out at all, I can always trim it off at the end. And I can trim it off a little if I wanted. But again, I'm going to just train the edges over, and now I'll glue them down. I want to make sure there's glue everywhere that I want a hold on the paper and the cardboard. And it doesn't have to be pristine or perfect. We are going to cover this area up with a little bit of backing paper. Having a nice backing makes for a really sturdy book, and it looks very professional when it's done. Burnish it into place, and then you can set this under a stack of books, or you can use clips to hold it in place. So I like to just use these clips. And that will just make sure that it dries nicely and securely. So I'll set this aside and start to work on the cover. So making the cover I always find to be the fun part, because you can use different techniques and it's a very forgiving cover. I love the raised design, and as soon as I saw the raised design on this wooden piece, I knew it was going to be perfect for a book cover and to make it look antiqued. So I have a little silicone mat here just to protect my work surface, and then I'm using my paint. Any acrylic paint will do. I'm going to take some of this paint and just paint the entire front of the piece as well as the back. And I don't have to complete the entire back, but just the edges here. Any area that might show where there won't be paper. Now I'm purposely using paper that's black, so whatever color paper you're using for the pages of your book, ideally that's the color you'd want to use to paint. You don't have to do it that way. You can always just paint it black and then use a different contrasting paper, but that's the way I like to do it. So I'm starting my piece here. I'm going to set it down just on this piece of cardboard. And now I want to make sure I paint all the way inside all these little areas here. So it's a little tricky. I find dabbing motion works a little bit better than a brushing motion. So again, I'll speed this along. I thought it was very interesting, this cover in itself, just because of the snake on the front. I didn't know if they had other designs. I only saw the snake when I went to buy it, but it was so intriguing. Now this sponge brush is great because it works quickly and it covers a lot of area, but it's not so great for those little nooks and crannies. So I'll get a smaller brush and dab the paint inside there as well. Because this is acrylic paint, it washes off with water. You don't want to get it on your clothing. It can be washed off with a little rubbing alcohol, but not 100% of the time. Now I'll find a little brush that's soft so that I can dip in the paint and really get into those little nooks and crannies, the little crevices. So I'll continue all the way around, making sure I have that covered very well. You can also add a second coat of paint if you want. When this dries, I'll take a look and see if it's necessary. These areas are pretty recessed, so depending on how the paint dries, it may require another coat. So I'll let that dry, and we'll come back and assess the situation. So now the cover's dry, and I think it looks pretty good. That's the back, the little exposed piece. So I think I'm ready to start the next stage, which is adding the gold finish. Now it's very interesting because this is built up in a lot of layers. I'm going to set my main book aside. You can see how there's a little darkness peeking through. Then I have a little accent color. I'll show you how to do that as well. So what I want to do is cover the raised areas with gold in the background and still let some of the black shine through. So I'll put my gold paint here with a dry brush. I'll pick up that gold paint. I'm just going to brush it across, and see how it, just by brushing it across, it brings out that snake, that raised texture in this case. So you can decide how much of that you want. You can, as I did here, really cover the entire thing with gold, or just have it show up a little bit. I think I'm going to make this one show up just a little bit. I like to brush the edges with gold as well. And then I'll come back in with a little bit of the black. I want to really accent that piece. And by pulling the paint towards the snake, I get a very interesting result. If there's any areas that build up too much, I'll just cover them with black again. But I do like the way it looks coming from the side. And I'll just play around with how much of that I want to show. You can also use a sponge if you don't want brush strokes or directional strokes. I like the way that's coming out. So that's looking pretty good to me. Looks a little different than this one, especially if I hold it at the correct way. It's a different color gold as well. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and just emphasize some of the areas with the black paint, just to make it really stand out. So now the gold is dried. You can see there are some areas here where it kind of pulled around the edge, the recesses. You could leave it like that if you want, but I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to take some of my black paint here, just put a little on my brush, make a little sharp point, and just come around to the edges here. Just pulling some of that color and creating a little bit of a shadow around the snake. I don't need a lot of pigment on my brush, just enough to really brush it around. And I like to do this all the way around the snake. It really looks like years of dirt have accumulated there. And I'll do the same thing, just a little bit in here. Gives a little more dimension to that snake. I'll also come in here and try and just pounce on those little recessed areas, just to make that come alive. And then I'm going to take a sponge, and this is just something I like to do. You don't have to do this. This is just something I like to do. I take a little paint, put it on a surface. I don't need very much. And with a damp sponge, damp just enough to make the sponge soft, I'll pick up that paint and just pounce it along the edge. And if I move it around, I get kind of a little bit of a worn look. Take a little more paint. Doesn't require very much work, but I do like the effect it gives. And if it comes out to be a little too dark for you, you can just go in there and pick up a little of that gold, just using my finger here, and just dabbing it on a few areas, particularly the raised areas. It's just a subtle effect. It makes this look like it's metallic, and it really emphasizes that raised area. Now on the book here, I have a little bit of this blue to look like it's a patina, like a brass patina. So to do that, I just take some of my turquoise paint, put a little down here on my work surface, and I'll do the same procedure. You can use the sponge, you can use your finger. Just want to take a little bit of that pigment and just start dabbing it in areas. If it looks a little too smooth, I'll just blend it out with my finger. Or if it looks a little too mottled, I just want to make it look like there's a little bit of age happening here. I think it's a beautiful effect. And I can go back in there with a little bit of gold and introduce that as well. You can really spend hours trying to make this look like a faux metallic cover. So I'm quite happy with that. Maybe I'll just spend another moment or two just creating some dimension. And then I'll let that completely dry and set that aside, and then we can work on the pages of our book. So while my cover is drying, I'm using the old cover from the actual book here, just taking the measurements, and it's a little more than 3 inches. So it's 9 centimeters. So I want to make my pages a little bit less than that. So I'm going to make them 8 centimeters square. And I already created a little template just with some cardboard here. I have my strip of paper, which is from that poster board. This is going to be the pages. It's about 28 inches long, just the standard length of a poster board. But now I need to fold the pages so that they're all 8 centimeters. So that's why I made this template. You could measure out 8 centimeters and do your folding. I just found that this template makes it a little bit easier. So I take my template and I'll make a little mark, and then another mark, and so on. And I can just find that mark, take my ruler to help create that page, and I fold it down, and I just line it up so that it's nice and even. So that's my first fold. And from there, I'll just burnish the edge. You can even use a bone folder or a little tool here. And now I just want to continue this fold. I'll go over and under the length of this piece of poster board. I just want to take my time and get my pages nice and neat and uniform. Just like that. I'll continue for the length of this piece. So now I folded all my pages and I have a little extra here. So I'm just going to cut that off just so that's evenly 8 centimeters. And then what I want to do is have a front and a back page. And the way it works out is I'll have my piece glued to the front of the book and then a piece to the back of the book. If your book is larger or smaller and you end on an odd page, just cut off that extra just so that you always end up with your ends flat down. So now I'm ready to start attaching it to my front and back covers. So here I have the back cover, and I would just attach it just like this with some glue or double-sided tape. And then I can put a piece of paper over that as well, just to cover up the back page, and it also reinforces it. And the same thing here. I can attach my page here and then put the cover on. What I like to do is attach the book, make sure it's in the right position for opening it in the way I want. And then with this extra piece of paper, I'll cut out additional pages. It's not going to be a perfect size in terms of it's not going to be the exact size of the cover, because when my book is put in, where the page ends is a little shy of the normal size book. So I'll play around with that by measuring it. So I'm taking my Mod Podge, putting it on that paper. Make sure I have a nice thick coating, not messy, but nice and thick, generous, right up to the edge of that paper, that fold. And then I'll put it right in place. Now with this cover, you can decide where you want, what direction you want to be top and bottom. So I'm going to have this snake going this way. So I just flip it over, find exactly where I want my pages to go, and then set them down. Just burnish it. Then I'll do the same thing to the back cover. I'll burnish the covers. And then I'll just clamp them together to let them dry just for a little bit. And then I can add my end pages. So now I have my book here. I measured inside, and I think I'm going to go with 8 1/4 centimeters. And I have them in squares here. And I'll just cover the paper, the end page, and it gives me just a little bit of a lip to go over the end of the book. So I have that for the front and the back. So I'll glue those down with my Mod Podge, clamp it, and then my book will be complete and be ready to be filled. And so here's the completed book. The inside is ready to be adorned however you wish. And this is the outside. It stands up just like that. So I really love the way this came out. Here's the book that I made. And you could see by using a slightly different color gold and a little heavier hand, you get a different look. Just love the way that came out. So that's how I make my faux metallic cover for my book and how I bind the book. I use that term loosely. It's a fun project. If you have some ideas on how to make your own, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And please consider becoming a paid member of my channel, where I share behind the scenes footage, a little peek into my personal life, and some additional techniques. Thanks for joining me today.